everybody. Jayne Spooner here, University of Minnesota Master Gardener, and welcome to this episode of What's Growin On. And I guess I'd kind of like to go, what's cooking on with what's growing on? We've been talking a lot about, gardening, flowers, and that kind of stuff. And earlier in the year, I did a little episode talking about starting vegetable gardens. And a little sign. It's just a sign. Yeah. It's a sign. Talking about people that were doing victory gardens. And there was a real resurgence in people wanting to grow their own food. It was kind of if they could have found toilet paper seeds, they probably would have and planted them. But people were looking to grow their own food at home. They had more time at home. They had more time to garden. It was a great way to get your family involved, and getting your family involved means getting the kids involved and maybe getting them to start eating some more vegetables. Well, working in the gardening industry, not only as a master gardener, but those of you that know me know I work for a greenhouse here in town, and I saw a lot of vegetables going through, the counter as I was boxing up stuff and taking care of them. And I got a lot of questions. How do I start? What do I do? And the very first thing I talked to people about was, have you ever had a vegetable garden? And they went, no. And I'd see them walking out with 12 tomato plants and 12 pepper plants, and that can be a little overwhelming for people. And believe you me, I did the same thing. I grew up with gardens with my family. My mom was an avid gardener, but there were 3 of us kids at home. We did a lot of canning and preserving, so I kind of grew up with that. And I remember my first foray into gardening myself as an adult. I decided I love cherry tomatoes, so I planted 6 cherry tomato plants. Well, you can imagine I had cherry tomatoes coming out of my ears, and I remember my oldest son, who's now in his 40s, sitting in the middle of all these cherry tomato plants, just plucking them and eating them like candy. So, I try and tell people to kind of plant what you can use, especially if you're a first-time gardener. You don't know how it's going to go, and if you put in 12 tomato plants and all of them die, you're just going to be frustrated. So do a little bit. But if you did overdo it overboard, well, now's the time of year where stuff is really starting to come into the garden, and it's starting to come into mine. So we're going to talk a little bit today about using some of this stuff to put away. Not only you're eating a lot, but eventually you just can't eat anymore, or you've got so much stuff on your counter and you don't have anybody to give it to. So there are certain things that you can do with certain things with your garden to kind of preserve it so you've got something for the summer. So we're going to kind of start talking about doing some freezing of some herbs, if you did any type of herb garden or whatever. So I've got a very large herb garden. I've got thyme, I've got parsley, Italian parsley, I've got rosemary, I've got tarragon, basil, I've got lavender, sage, and just all kinds of different things. And I can use so much of it right now, like basil. I don't really have a lot of extra of it because our tomatoes are starting to come in. We love caprese salad around here, so we're using a lot of that now, and we're making pesto. But there's some other things like tarragon. I planted a tarragon plant, and tarragon is a perennial, and it grows like this. It's just a huge bush, and I've had this plant for 10 years, and it's huge. So I've just got tons and tons of tarragon. And so what I'm doing here is I pick some, and tarragon, when you smell it, it smells kind of licoricey, so it's really good with like potatoes and carrots and chickens. And you can do herb butters, herb olive oils. You can even do like a herb tarragon vinegar. You can see it in the store. Well, sometimes they'll have a sprig of it. So what I'm going to do today, what I'm going to talk about, is the first way to kind of preserve some of the herbs from your garden is freezing them. So the easiest way that I like to do it is, first of all, you're going to take your herbs. Now this is some tarragon, and I just kind of plucked it off the leaves, and you just take it and you go backwards down the leaf, and it just pops right off. So I did that ahead of time. And I do watch a lot of food TV, so I've learned a lot of tricks along the trade, so I'm not a trained culinary type individual. I just like to eat. So just kind of take all these leaves, and I kind of like to take and bunch them up. Then always stick your finger out like that, and then I just do kind of a rough chop. And when I get through the whole stack, I just kind of there you go. So that's all chopped, and I've got some that's pre-chopped up here. So I'm going to do, grab this all up in this bowl here, and I just went to the dollar store and just got some cheap ice cube trays. So what I'm going to do is probably take about a tablespoonful of this herb and just kind of push it down in there. Okay. Then, so not to waste any space here, get some of this out of here. I've got some rosemary, and this is what rosemary looks like, kind of almost like a tarragon, but this smells a little piney, and this is really good with chicken and stuff and your potatoes. So you can just lay it in a package of potatoes when you're cooking them, you know, in a foil pack or whatever. And then people will even take some of your bigger stems of rosemary, and they'll strip off all the leaves, and they'll spread on like a tomato and cheese and make like a little hors d'oeuvre stick with it too. So you can kind of a multi-purpose. So again, I did the same thing. I chopped it up, putting it in these little cubes, and you can kind of see the difference as you get to work with your herbs, what's what in here. So there's all my rosemary. And then this is thyme. So it's kind of like Simon and Garfunkel, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. And this is thyme. And these are really a little bit easier to work with because you see the leaves are not that big. So you just kind of pull them off. You don't really even need to chop them. And like if you're making a soup or a stew or whatever, you can actually just throw this whole sprig in there and it'll naturally fall off, and you just pull out the stem when you're done with the cooking. So here we go. We're gonna throw that in there. Okay, and then here's some olive oil, just basic olive oil. And I'm just gonna fill up each little compartment with olive oil. Now you can also do this using water if you want. So using water is a good way to preserve mince if you want to use that during the winter when you want to just infuse your water with something other when you're drinking all your water. Okay. And just pop it in the freezer like that. Now when this gets frozen all nice and hard, I'll take this tray out and I'll pop all the cubes out just for space saving, and what I'll do is then I'll throw them in a baggie, like a freezer baggie or a freezer container, and just throw it in the freezer. And then when I'm doing cooking, if I'm going to say I want to braise up some chicken breast to maybe bake later on or whatever, I'll just take and pop it out, throw it in the pan. Or if I do foil potatoes, or if I'm doing baked carrots or whatever, just throw it in there with the oil. You can also do this with water if you're going to use it for like a stew application too. So it just depends on what you're going to cook. So this is going to bring you summer freshness all winter long. And these aren't the only herbs that you can use. You can do it with basil, you can do it with sage. I mean, it depends how you're going to use it and what you like to cook with. So there's one application for you. And another thing that's really fun to do is to do an herbed butter. Again, we're going to use some tarragon in here. I softened up a couple sticks of butter because nothing beats butter. Sorry, margarine. I diced up some tarragon here. I'm going to take some garlic. Set that aside. What I'm going to do is give this a good stir. Now, because we're out in the sun, this is really kind of softened up a little bit, so it's going to make it a little bit more difficult to work with. But I'll at least tell you what I'll do next is I'm going to take this in the house and maybe put it in the refrigerator for a little while so it kind of gets a little bit more solid again. And then what I'll do is I'm going to plop it up onto some parchment paper, and what I'm going to do is just kind of take and shape it into a log and just kind of let it freeze that way. And then from there I'm going to wrap it in plastic and set it in the refrigerator, or set it in the freezer, because you can freeze this, or as if you want to just leave it in a log on a cookie sheet, what you can do is after it's good and frozen, you can actually slice it up into pats of butter. So if you're just cooking and want to put a pat of butter, say you want to just put it on the table for a nice display to put it on bread or potatoes or whatever, you can do that too. And again, this works with a lot of different herbs. You can use parsley, you can use garlic, you can make your own garlic butter. We've done that. So this is another way to use up some of the herbs in your garden, you know, throughout the winter, and kind of pep up your meals to remind you of the crazy summer that we've had. So let's put that aside. Sorry, I don't have that sous chef to open up the refrigerator and pull out all these fancy things. So we're just going to set that over there. So let's talk about perhaps now doing some pickling. People are thinking, well, I don't really want to go through the canning process. I don't want to buy all this stuff. Well, it's called a quick pickling method. So I'm going to show you a couple different things that I'm going to do that are really quite easy. Flip this around. So this one's really easy. So like us, we buy homemade pickles. My husband loves these deli sliced pepper rings. And after we get done eating them, I mean, this pickle juice and this brine here is still really good. This is a gherkin, so it's kind of a sweet pickle flavor. And then this is just kind of a vinegar based. And my husband likes these pepper rings. We use them on salads. We'll take and chop them up and put them in pasta salads. If we're making homemade pizza, we'll throw it on the top of pizzas. Throwing pepper rings in here. You can do this with cucumbers too, but we're going to use banana peppers today. You know, you can use these on top of salads or just to eat them, put them on a sandwich or whatever. So what I have here are banana peppers. And then these are Hungarian wax peppers. So banana peppers, they're very prolific, and as they stay on the vine, they start yellow, and then the longer you leave it on here, it'll turn to kind of a orangey to a red. And so what I did was, these are a sweet banana pepper, so there's no heat to them. I don't worry about taking the seeds out to keep the heat down. So it's just a really nice mild pepper, and will take on the flavor of the brine or the pickling juice here. And so basically I've just taken and sliced them up into a circle. Set that aside. Now these are kind of hard. I'll give you a trick about cooking with peppers. If you're making pepper rings like this, it's going to be a little harder to cut into them just because of the skin on the outside. If you ever watch cooking shows and you see them take a great big bell pepper, cut it down the side, splay it open, and cut out the insides, and they cut the inside flesh where it's easier to get that knife down. This is kind of waxy on the outside, so it makes it a little bit tougher to get through. And notice I'm not worrying about the seeds just because they don't add or any heat or anything to it. So I'm just cutting these up. We've taken and just cut these in half, taken out the ribs and stuff, filled them with a cream cheese and bacon filling, and put them on the grill as kind of an appetizer. So there's a lot that you can do with these. Now these are Hungarian wax peppers, and I'm not going to include these in here because these babies are hot. So what I will do is probably come up with just a homemade pickling pickling solution and do those separately, because I don't want to mix the two together, because if somebody comes over to eat and they don't like hot, we're in for craziness. So again, I just saved the brine. I'd washed those, sliced them, just open that up, and I'm just gonna stick those in there, just like that. And then just put them back in the refrigerator, and they'll sit them for a week so that they kind of absorb all that brine solution, so that they pickle up a little bit. And then here, we'll take the sweet pickle juice and fill that up as much as it will allow me. And as these absorb some of that liquid, they'll kind of shrink up a little bit and have a little more room. And again, put the cover on, put it back in the refrigerator, leave it sit for a week, and you've got pickled pepper rings. There you go. So let's say you've got a lot of cucumbers. Cucumbers can be kind of sneaky, you know. You really, if you have a cucumber plant and you're going out to harvest once or twice a day, you really got to move all those leaves. I tell you, I thought I had everything, and all of a sudden they grow really fast in this heat, and I came out and I found a cucumber this big. It almost looked like a zucchini. It was still good. I cut it open, and what I did was I just hollowed out the seeds, and we have a kind of a cucumber salad in the refrigerator that we keep adding to. So I just peeled it and threw it in there. So now I'm going to do just like a quick, what they call a quick refrigerator pickle. So I took a couple cucumbers, and just like a pickle, I left the skin on. Just cut them about 1/4 of an inch. Okay, just throw them in there. And you can use, if you've got a canning jar or a nice glass jar to put them in. I'm going to throw 3 cloves of garlic in there. And by the way, as this starts to pickle in there, you can eat these cloves of garlic. If you've ever had pickled garlic, it's really good, especially kind of helps ward off vampires. But the weird thing about the reaction with vinegar and garlic is sometimes the garlic will turn blue. It's still really good, but don't think that you've ruined them. So then I made a homemade quick pickling solution. It's 2 cups of cider vinegar, a 1/2 cup of sugar, salt, some kosher salt, and then you can use like a combination of mustard seed and black peppercorns. I took, it comes in a jar. It's called pickling spice. And it's a combination of allspice, mustard, bay leaf, black peppercorns, and it just kind of makes it a little bit sweeter of a pickle. So all I did was just layer those in there, and I'm just going to pour that in. And again, that's going to sit for a while. And then I've got a few of these leftover pepper rings, and I can throw those in there too. Again, it's a sweet pepper. These are going to be a sweet pickle. And you can kind of play with it. Just look on the internet. There's all kinds of quick pickle recipes. You can add more garlic. You can add onion in there. If you want something with a little heat, you can add a jalapeno in there. You know, we like heat, so I could easily throw those Hungarian wax peppers in there. So I'm just going to throw that in there, kind of mix it down and around. And then I'm going to throw that in the refrigerator. And just like if you're canning them and heat packing them, you'll want to wait a few days before you eat them, because you really want them to absorb all that pickling brine in there. So that's just another way to kind of preserve some of it without going into a lot of work and a lot of expense of buying a lot of equipment to do some canning. Now some other things that I've done, if you want to, is my camera guy and I were talking about how he's got all these cherry tomatoes coming in. Well, if you're looking for, we've been spending a lot more time at home, my husband and I. So Friday and Saturday nights is kind of our own little happy hour back here. So we usually like to have something kind of to nosh on or whatever while we're having an evening cocktail. So these are just a couple of things that I've done up. If you like caprese salad, which is a tomato, basil, and a buffalo mozzarella cheese with garlic or with olive oil and balsamic vinegar, this is going to be right up your alley because it's kind of that one bite. You know, they talk about on food shows like, give me your best bite. You know, what's the best thing I've ever eaten? So what I've done is I have some, it's called a Rapunzel tomato, and then a chocolate pear tomato. And those are all starting to come in pretty good, and I like to eat them. I keep them on the counter, and I just, if I'm looking for something to snack on, I'll just pop one in my mouth and eat it. But I found mozzarella in the shape of already pre-made little balls. You can buy them in the cheese section. I halved them. I put a skewer, I put it on the skewer of the cheese, the basil, and then the cherry tomato, and then some more basil, and then just put it, you can do that up ahead of time, and then all I do is I take a little bit of my olive oil, I'm going to drizzle it over it, and I don't have a fancy plate to make a really fancy display, but when you're just at home, and then just a drizzle of really good balsamic vinegar, and I just and then I'll take some cracked black pepper. And this can all be done up ahead of time, the skewers, and then just take and pull it out, put on your olive oil and your balsamic vinegar and away in the cracked black pepper, and you've got happy hour ready to go. Okay, and then my tomatillos are starting to come in. So over the weekend, I took them along with some peppers, and you can use cilantro. I'm not a huge cilantro fan, so I used some parsley, some Italian leaf parsley from my garden. Threw the tomatillos and the peppers and an onion. I put it on the grill, on a griddle, and fire roasted them. Waited till they cooled down, threw them in a blender, and just whipped it around. And so I've got a little tomatillo sauce. I can eat it cold, or I can use it for cooking. I had a really good recipe where I took and browned up chicken breasts in a pan and then put salsa verde, so this is what's called really salsa verde, put it in the oven and just baked it down. So I had salsa verde chicken. So another way to kind of use it, and you can freeze this and have it for the summer for later on if you're going to cook with it. Maybe not so much for eating because it's going to get a little mushy, but you know, great to have for the summer, kind of summer and winter kind of deal. Another thing when it comes to your herbs is drying them, okay? Something like this, you can actually just grab a bunch of them, hang it upside down, just let it dry naturally. You can put them in the oven or the microwave and dry them, or you can buy a food dehydrator if you really want to get into that kind of stuff, and do more drying. We'll talk a little bit about that here in a minute. And then just take and pull off the leaves after they're dry, leave them out for a little bit, and then just put them in a jar, and then, you know, use them for the winter. And you can do that with virtually any herb, and always have something on hand. Fresh is always better, but you can't have that in the summer and in the winter time. So at least you're stocking your herb supply at home for the winter time. So like I said before at the beginning of the show, my family was very big into canning and preserving and freezing. My parents were grew up in farming families, so we always had huge gardens. So we did a lot of canning and preserving, and as a kid, you're kind of like, this is really, oh my God, I really don't want to do it. Well, as you grow older, you start to miss some of those things, and you think, you know, I really would like to do a little bit more of this. So one year, I really did take the opportunity, and I started small. I started with some jams and jellies, because those are pretty easy to do, but it also takes a little bit of time and effort and a little bit of knowledge. So you're going to want to do some, refer to some books and stuff. So talk a little bit about that here. Wipe this off. Dirty books. First of all, if you're going to start canning, preserving, and freezing, I'm just going to share this with you. Before buying books that you don't really know what you're doing about, and I'm going to post this once the show gets posted online, I will take and post this link along with the posting on FCTV Network. But the University of Minnesota Extension Service has a food, health, and nutrition website within the Extension Service. And there you can go in and you can find out everything you need to know about canning, preserving, safe methods. There's online video courses. They're right now in the midst of doing some free courses on canning and preserving, making jams and jellies, making pickles, and you'll see that schedule there. So we'll get this link to you because it's really a great way to start small and you know, get all the information you need in case you want to really, you know, take a look at doing a little bit more. And it is fun. It was the first year that I really got into the canning. I not only did jams and jellies, but I got really kind of excited, and I remembered a lot of stuff that my mom had done. And so I got into doing some tomatoes and salsa. I just basically hot packed whole tomatoes so that I could use later on in the winter time to throw in with roasts and that. And boy, my kids were taking them and using them. I gave them as gifts to my in-laws. So it was really a lot of fun. And when I had to open that last jar for the winter, I really noticed it. So, and I've kind of gotten away from it. So now that I'm retired, I'm hoping to get back into it a little bit more. But another good another good source of reference for canning is they manufacture glass canning jars, and it's called Ball. And these two books are the first two books I bought about canning. Just because I remembered my mother's Ball Blue Book of Canning. When she passed away, I went through her cookbooks and took everything, and this was the first thing because this was our Bible growing up where we did all of our canning. And I think too it was kind of fun when I pulled it out the other day to see it was only 25 cents when I think I spent 25 on this book and I think 10 on this at departments or one of the chain stores. There's another version of this out there too. It's pretty much the same. They've got some added things in there. But not only do they talk canning and of fruits and vegetables, but there's even sections on dehydration, freezing your vegetables. So it's really another really, really great source to use. And then if you're looking at getting into dried foods, I just found this up at the library. I got to go into the library, made my appointment, got to go in and browse. And so I'm looking at getting into a little bit more food preservation by drying. And I'm looking at purchasing a food dehydrator because I follow a lot of Facebook groups and I'm seeing people doing canning and freezing, and the dehydration part of it really kind of struck me because people are actually, you know, I talk about these peppers and pickling. People will freeze peppers, but people are actually freezing peppers now into small chunks and using those, or they're taking and grinding them up in a food mill and using it as a powder. So you think about peppers, you know, when you're doing a chili powder, what is that? That's just a pepper that grew on a plant and it's just dried down and it's smoked or whatever. And so I can make my own chili powders. I can do mixtures. There's even people that are taking and mixing those up with kosher salts for seasonings. And so just some really, really fun things to do out there if you've got the time. And if you want to continue on a journey of good cooking and good health by growing your own things, this is a great way to do some of those things. So it's kind of some of the things that I had going on here today that I wanted to share with you. I hope you've taken some of this home with you, and we'll try a little bit of it. This is just some really small stuff for y'all to work with, to kind of keep some of that summer goodness going through the winter. We have no idea what it's going to bring us nowadays, but at least you can think about the garden that you grew. And just another thing, I just kind of wanted to invite you. Years ago, I tried to start a blog and just didn't go. And I had started a Facebook page called What's Growin On. And since I've gotten back into doing these programs a little bit more, I've kind of started posting a little bit more, just doing some onesies here and there about things that are coming into my garden, just little things I'm finding in my garden. It's more whimsical, and I'm starting to put more links to things on the University of Minnesota Extension website. And there are some other What's Growin On Facebook pages, so if you want to find me, instead of looking for What's Growin On, just put in the @ at MG Jayne, at Master Gardener Jayne, and you should be able to find my page. And just like Troy posts this on the FCTV site, I also post this show on my my Facebook page. And I'm actually working on starting an Instagram account too. So I'm just having fun with the garden, and I hope you're having fun in your garden. I know I spent a lot of time out here. This is really nice. I don't have to wear a mask out here. I'm outside. And it's been a good summer in my garden, and I hope you're having a good summer in your garden. And our next journey, I'm thinking, we talked a little about pickling, and we talked about making some hors d'oeuvres. So just maybe in a couple weeks, we'll come up with an episode, how to use things from your garden for your cocktail hour. And I mean cocktails, not food. So until we meet again, I wish you well, wash your hands, stay safe, and happy digging.